Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Sound Advice Podcast. I'm your host, Geno Medina. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you like what you hear and you want to know what we're up to, make sure you click the little bell notifications. You'll know when we got a new video posted. And subscribe to the channel. You'll never miss a beat, just like our drummers and bass players and other musicians. Again, this podcast is designed by working musicians for working musicians with the goal of helping working musicians get out there and work. We just want to keep you busy, help you get to those next level tier gigs, and hopefully one day you'll be a rock star or a soul singing sensation. You'll look back on this and go, hey man, let's say thanks to Geno. Actually, you don't have to do that. Just like, subscribe, and listen. Coming up on the show today, we have a very special guest, an amazing session drummer who hails from Atlanta, Georgia. He has been in numerous tribute bands in the area, and he's really good at it. He has worked with many, many corporate bands and has even sat in with national recording artists like Confederate Railroad. So this guy knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing. He's going to be joining us for a nice conversation, so stick around for that. I just want to let you know, coming up also, we do have a series coming up for working musicians. We're going to be focusing on the managerial side of gig hustling. And simply put, that just means the day-to-day business and operations of keeping your band busy, booking dates, getting paid, making sure that your contract writers are in order and all that good stuff. We've got some very special guests coming up who are going to join us, and we're going to tackle specific items in that regard. So if your business acumen is not what you want it to be, hopefully you'll get something from these podcasts. This is a series that will be starting here shortly. Also coming down the pike, we've got session musician Adam Gust from Los Angeles. He'll be joining us on the podcast in the near future, as well as Amy Gearhartz, who is a singer-songwriter based out of Nashville, Tennessee. She has done a lot of great work. If you've seen the Anna Nicole Smith biopic on Lifetime, that is Amy Gearhartz singing the remake of Fame, that classic hit from Irene Cara. So they'll be joining us on the program later, and I've also managed to reach out to a gentleman by the name of Jock Bartley. May not sound like a familiar name to you, but you definitely know his work. He is one of the founding members of the 70s band called Firefall out of Boulder, Colorado. They had a string of top 40 hits, and Jock has been kind enough to agree to do the show, so I'm going to try and get him on here. So we got a lot of good stuff coming up in the near future. So again, click the little bell and subscribe to the channel, and you'll know when all of that stuff is going to be happening. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase because George and I had a really nice long conversation, and I want to go ahead and share that with you. So please turn it up, tune in, and stick around with this conversation with George Sandler. Well, with me is session drummer George Sandler from Atlanta, Georgia. He is a graduate of Georgia State University. He is a professional musician and has been doing so for over 40 years. He is also an educator. He's taught music for 15 years or more, I believe. And he's actually marched in the Spirit of Atlanta Drum and Bugle Corps back in the early 80s. So please welcome my esteemed guest and dear friend, drummer extraordinaire, Mr. George Sandler. How you doing, George?
Doing great, man. I sure miss being here in Atlanta. I really do, man.
Well, thank you.
Doggone far.
Well, you know, life takes us in crazy places, but you're in a great market for what you're doing as a professional drummer, and not just a drummer. You're pretty much an all-around musician kind of guy. So why don't you kind of give me a little idea of how you got into the music, and then tell me a little bit about how you developed as a drummer stylistically, and we'll go from there. That way people kind of know what your musical approach is about.
So I got into it just like everybody else. I had my mom said I had a penchant for playing on the floor with her pots and pans and going that route. It's just one of those things that I was always drawn to the drums. I remember going to a concert at a very early age in Warm Springs where we lived, and there was a band there playing in the street, not on the street, but in kind of a street setting, and they were doing like Grand Funk Railroad's The Locomotion. And I remember the guy had a Ludwig kit, and I think it was a Blue Sparkle kit, and I was just like drawn to it. So I picked up on the Beatles and so forth, and then I got into school band. I actually joined the school band in 6th grade and marched in high school, did the all-state thing, then got in the jazz band. I did march in drum and bugle corps. We can talk about that a little bit. And then decided that at one point I thought that I was either going to do one of two things. I was either going to be a music educator, which is a band director, or I was going to be a symphony percussionist. And I did do the band directing thing, kind of. I was a percussion instructor at a high school in Conyers, Georgia, where I live, for 10, 12 years and taught private lessons. And I've done a little bit of that over the years. I haven't done as much of it because the game has changed so much. And with regards to playing classical music, I took a look at the list of percussionists in the major symphonies across the country when I was a junior in college. And those cats were all like in their mid to late 30s, early 40s. And I'm like, those guys don't leave. They retire when they're very old. And I thought, man, that's an awful long time to be hungry. That takes a discipline that some guys just don't have. And I'm just being honest. It's
you mean to play a role in the symphony?
Oh, yeah.
The discipline of classical is really exacting. I'll give you that.
It's a big time exacting thing. So I just decided that while I still love doing that, and I still get a chance to play it on occasion, I get to play timpani with some churches and some percussion. And then when I'm doing sessions, the percussion stuff always comes into play. I just thought that I should try to make a living sooner than age 35.
So you didn't really focus on any one genre of music growing up. You dabbled in everything along the way, and that probably lends to your versatility.
I remember back when we lived in Perry, they had this old theater, and they had this thing called the Stagecoach. And what it was a house band. You played a lot of country music, and my dad said, "You need to go do that. They've asked you to play." I'm like, "Dad, I can't stand country music." He said, "You need when you go, you need to keep your mouth shut because everybody's older than me." And I remember it was all shuffles and brushes and old country stuff. And I got to tell you, after doing it, I thought, okay, I get it. My dad's way smarter than I am. And then my high school was very fortunate. I think some schools do this. I know Buford does it, but we had a variety show every year. It was called Showtime at the high school that I was there. And we did stuff like Broadway songs, country songs, rock songs, pop songs, even jazz. That was a very, very pivotal thing for me to be able to go from playing Moon River to, I love playing different stuff. I think the only thing that I'm not real crazy about, it's just because I don't do it, is playing, heavy metal double bass, because I just never played double bass before.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a lot of cover bands or original bands doing that on local levels, and unless they're hitting the club scene in like LA or New York or something like that. I don't typically see that in any of the markets. When I was in Atlanta, I don't believe I ever saw a band like that doing originals at a small venue. It would usually be like Smith's Old Bar, where the venue's geared towards that sort of a thing. But you dabble in all kinds of music. You've played everything from Frank Sinatra to Katy Perry, and some of the session work I've seen on your Facebook page where you guys are doing like the isolated recordings. Mm-hmm. Are those tracks for another artist, or are those backing tracks for licensing? Or
John has created some of those things that you see are for artists, but he's created with the company called Tune Designer. He's created this thing called Tune Ready Tracks, and we'll take a track. Let's say we want to write kind of a Southern rock kind of vibe, so we'll come up with these chord progressions. We'll come up with an intro, verse, chorus, possibly a turnaround, a chorus, solo, bridge, and then an outro. And what that does, that let's say you're a songwriter and you can't play anything, and you could buy those tracks, and once you buy them, they're yours. Nobody else can take them, and you can even tell everybody, I played every note on there. I played the drum. We don't care. But you buy them, and so yes, those are licensed tracks that once you buy them, no one else can have it. It's your track. So yeah, we do a lot of that. Like we'll say, well, we're going to do a modern country one. It might involve me programming a loop in the first verse, or we'll do a traditional country one. It's a shuffle, get down and dirty with it. Or we're going to do like a modern worship thing. It's going to do a lot of toms, or stuff like that. We try to imagine, okay, what's kind of happening and go from there.
You're not necessarily in it to create a new musical trend. You're just kind of going along with the vibe of whatever might be relevant today musically, and then is that how that works? Or
I think that's accurate, Geno, because what we're trying to do is sell tracks. Now, we do something called a human loop, which is essentially me going back and doing a loop, but we'll use like different sources. Like I'll take a big fat snare drum, play some really dirty hi-hats, and then we'll put a filter on it so it sounds distorted, and we'll go that route. So that's a human loop. We don't program that. That's actually me playing. But we're in the business to, as far as trend setting goes, my goodness, I'm not sure. I don't want that responsibility. You know?
Yeah, that seems like it's better left to those young kids.
Right.
Let them do it. They got all the energy.
I think it takes a certain amount of time to do that. And to be honest with you, we try to cut a certain amount of tracks in a day. We cut a fair amount in a day. And so we spend time on them, but we don't spend, we don't go in the studio and say, well, we're going to cut this one track today. That's just not how we do it. So, and I don't know that I've ever been a part of any session where it's like one song. We're going to do one song today, fellas. I mean, everything I know, it's at least been 2 songs, 3 songs, or whatever, depending on the time frame.
So do you guys just find stock sounds, like good quality stock sounds in the studio, and then just run with that for the 3 tracks that you might do in the day? Or
we do 9 tracks in a day.
Oh, wow.
I have to say this. We've been playing together for a long time, and we know what each other's going to do. And to me, there's no replacing that. We do sound like a band because we are a band. But the drums stay set up. I'll swap out snare drums or even cymbals. Daniel's got a Kemper with a bunch of different amp sounds on it.
Those are such nice modelers. Yeah.
Oh,
those are great.
If it were me as a guitar player,
they're top of the line, man. They're up there with. Well, I think they're top of the heap. I'm pretty partial to the Pod 500 DX or whatever it's called. I have it, and I don't know what the model number is, but I'm partial to it because it fits my needs, and I can navigate through it. But yeah, those Kempers are amazing. But yeah, the tracks sound really good. What I've heard sounds really, really nice. But you're not just relegated to doing tracks in session. You do a lot of gigs around town, and I kind of get the sense that you're doing upwards of 3 to 5 gigs a week. Is that fair to say, or
that's accurate? That's accurate, and it's starting to come back a little bit.
How did you find yourself in a position where you were able to, first of all, work that much as a drummer playing in venues? How did you get to that point? And then beyond that, how do you keep your schedule such that you can consistently rely on a dependable revenue stream? Because most of us who are working musicians, we don't want to work a 9 to 5 for the man, as it were. We want to do our craft, on our craft. And that's the biggest challenge I think a lot of us face, especially in trying times like with a pandemic or a down economy, whatever the case might be. Finding ways to keep those revenue streams flowing, Mm-hmm. So how did you find yourself in a position? How did you get to a point where you're working that much, and how do you sustain that? That's the short way to ask the long question I just asked.
Right. So I will say this as humbly as I possibly can. I just try to go in very prepared in whatever I do. I try to be completely prepared. I mean, I've played with you, and, when we played together, you gave me a list of songs, and I would spend the week preparing, getting the tracks together for you, would send me, and then make myself, I don't know the song, I'm going to make a chart for it. Just being prepared. The other thing, and I'm very blessed for this, and I say that with all humbleness, I think that I've made not only just friends over the years, but relationships with people who I work with. They know that I'm going to come in, not going to be a pain in the butt for the most part. I mean, but I'm going to be on time. I'm going to have great sounding gear.
That is definitely for sure. I will give you that above all others. Go ahead. I just got to give you that endorsement because I was telling Mary the other day about the time when we played in what you affectionately referred to as the armpit of Georgia, and you came on board as a percussionist. And I was telling Mary how impressed I was. You had the conga set up, you had your electronic, I think it was Octopad or something to that effect, but you had your electronics set up. You had the accessory percussion things like triangles and the chimes, and it just added so much color, and it just helped the drums breathe so much. And that you were actively listening to what the drummer was doing so that you didn't crowd or step on toes. And it was so beautifully well executed, getting ahead just a little bit stylistically, having all those skill sets, percussion, drums. There's some others that you have in there that I think might also be responsible for how busy you're able to stay. So can
Okay.
you expand on those once I let you finish your answer that I just
Sure.
interrupted?
No, and that's fine. And thank you for that. I love to play percussion. I don't ever get to do it as a percussionist because I'm hired as a drummer, but I love doing it. Boy, I remember that gig. That gig was when we played at that winery and it rained like we were all getting ready to hop on an ark. And that poor bride and the groom had to do their ceremony in the middle of the winery, and her dress had red mud, red clay all over it. And it
Yeah.
rained and it rained and it rained all night long. I remember that.
She was dead set on having that ceremony at the gazebo. It just didn't
I'm
happen.
in the middle of the winery. I'm like, man, it's monsoon out there. I don't know what you're thinking, but look. Oh, thank you for that. I just love sound, and I just want. Over the years, I know what works, and I want things to sound good. At least from the time it leaves the tip of my stick out, I know it's going to sound good. Whatever a sound guy or whatever does, but at that point, I have very little control over. Although I do own my own mics, own my own mic cables, and all that stuff. So, but then I think the other part of your question is how have I stayed busy, or what do I need to do? Gino, I just stay on top of it. I make sure that people. And even to this day, I still go when I see somebody and they get a drummer, I'm going, man, I wonder why they didn't ask me. And sometimes I go, dude, I forgot about you because I figured you'd be working. And I always tell somebody, man, I know you think I'm going to be working, and that's a great compliment, but always ask because there's a 50-50 chance that I'm not working. And so always ask. So
you're always on the hustle then.
Oh, I'm still hustling.
I remember you hustling me. Calling me just, hey, I'm available this weekend. And it worked. The skill set that you brought to that particular band every time that you performed with us, I remembered all that. And then a few months ago, Jason with Fire and the Knife had asked for recommendations. And your name had come up. I had mentioned to him that when you performed with me, you were a consummate professional. You were always on time. You had everything you needed. You had your own mics, your own cables. And I never had to worry about that. And I never really thought too much about what a relief that was to not have to have that on my plate other than just finding a drummer. That goes a really long way. And then from what I've seen on Facebook from after some of these gigs that you've done with Fire and Knife, it seems like that relationship's going really, really well. And that speaks back to what you had mentioned earlier, which is just networking.
I love Jason and Nani, man. I love those guys. And we did a gig a couple weeks ago in Ackworth, and we just had fun. And I think that's the other ingredient. If you're a drag to be on stage with, and you're, like I said, it doesn't matter how good you play. You've just got to, I enjoy their music too. I mean, and that helps. But I mean, even if it's something that you're not really jazzed about doing, either don't do the gig or go in there with a happy face and make it your own, play the gig, be happy about it. You could be home watching Hogan's Heroes,
That's true. Yeah, I don't like that as an alternative.
Yeah. So, and then you were asking me about skill sets. So with me, with what I've done, and I've just tried to keep adding skill sets to my portfolio, so to speak. I started out as a drummer and a percussionist. And then, the big thing was drum machines at one point. And I'm like, well, shoot, I'd rather program that than a keyboard player. So I got a drum machine and started doing that. And I did a fair amount of work programming drum machines.
Did you have that resistance? Because you and I are kind of, I think younger musicians would consider us to be old school. But I've used sequences and tracks since the late 80s. And so I never had an aversion to integrating technology, especially where drums were concerned, into any of the projects that I'd worked on. Did you find that it was difficult to integrate electronics into your organic drum set, or was it a natural evolution for you?
I'll be honest with you, it was natural for me because I just always thought my biggest thing is, okay, let's say we take a song like the Bruno Mars, what is it? the slow song we used to do that had the snaps in the chorus.
Got a condo in Manhattan. That one.
Yeah. So I could have easily said, well, I'm not going to bring any electronics. I'll just play it as a click on the stick or play it on the hi-hat. But to me, if you're going to go for that vibe, you need to try to get that sound. And, if I heard something, live that had like a conga loop in it, well, I had at the time, I started off with some Roland machine, maybe an Alesis machine. And then I got a Roland R8. And I bought all the sound cards. I made a lot of money with that. And then I went to an MPC, an Akai MPC, and had the case for the MPC plus a briefcase full of floppies. And I mean, when I say full of floppies.
I remember those days.
Then I went to the software-based thing, which is Reason. And now basically what I do is I'll program a loop and go there. But I like doing that.
That's pretty cool. So that's one skill set. You have some skill sets that aren't so software rooted. You have a pretty damn good singing voice there, from what I remember.
I would say that I feel like I'm getting better too in this new band that I'm playing with called Still Rose. I'm actually the second vocalist. We have a very strong female vocalist, and then I'll cover the other male stuff along with the guitar player doing one or two songs. And it's something I've worked on. I feel like if I can stay in my lane, pick songs that I know that I can sound decent on, then I'm okay. I would never go, oh, I'm a great singer, sign me to a record contract, because that. But I can harmonize fairly well, and I can sing while I'm playing. And that in itself for a drummer can be tough.
Yeah, you're doing it Don Henley and Phil Collins style.
Yeah. I will say that watching Don Henley play, he's got one of those big studio mic stands that come way over the top of his head. He uses a regular mic. I have a headset, but I've gotten to the point where I don't use it. I use a regular mic so I can work the mic. And I also love to wear in-ear monitors. I don't like floor monitors. I just don't like speaker monitors. And if I'm wearing my glasses and in-ear monitors, slapping a headset mic over that, my ears are going to look like Dumbos.
That's a lot to consider, man. That's a lot of headgear.
Yeah. A belt pack here, a belt pack there. And I just, no. So singing is a thing. And then the other thing I've tried to pick up on is I have my own recording studio. And what I've tried to do over the years is learn a little bit about running sound engineering and whole nine yards and doing that. I run sound for some churches, Rehoboth Baptist Church for one. And I really like doing it. The other night we were playing and we were getting feedback from the kick drum. And I was able to go, I think if you pull the gain back, that'll take care of it. And just knowing about that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not a Chris Lord algae or whatever, but I do know what a 400K sounds like. I do know what 4K and 2K adding to the mix on a kick drum does. And I have my own mics, like we talked about. I have the Sennheiser series tom 604s that I take out live, Beta 52 kick, 57 snare, SM81 overheads. And what I did, Geno, was very simple. I will ask anybody any question whatsoever. I always went to the sound guys and went, what's up with this? Why are you doing it this way? Or engineers in studio, tell me what the deal is with this. So I wanted to know. I just have this thirst for knowledge, and I want to do it right. And so I asked people who I always thought were way smarter than me, which is not hard to find. Why did you do this? Tell me what the deal is and tell me what I should do. When I first built this studio, I went to all potential clients and said, what do you need from me? If I set up my own studio, how many inputs do you want? What kind of sounds are you looking for? And so on.
You did that from square one, knowing that you were catering to people other than yourself. This wasn't just going to be a project studio for you. This was going to be a potential source of income or a business venture, something to that effect.
Absolutely. I spent a fair amount of money on what I have, and I mean, this isn't just George's playground. I want money here. And so and it's ended up being really good with that. I've got artists all over that send me tracks, and I lay drum tracks for them. And it's a lot of fun to do that. And I can come down in my pajamas if I'm, it's nice.
Did you find during the shutdowns, did you find that studio work picked up when live shows fell off? Did you have the fortune of at least having that kind of a balance there?
I will tell you this, that I was very fortunate in that Tune Designer, the place that I work at on a regular basis, never slowed down. They were very good about that, because one of the issues with them is that we don't usually have clients in the studio. So it's 3 or 4 guys, and guys always social distance anyway. We're not going to be up in each other's grill. So that kept going. And I did pick up a fair amount of people saying, man, I've got nothing to do but write music, and I want you to play drums on it. Absolutely. Now, a couple of studios I did work for on the outside basis have slowed down. One guy, I'm doing a session with him next week at his place in Alpharetta. For lack of a better word, I think his better half was a little paranoid about folks coming over to the house.
With all that gear.
Yeah. I get it. So that didn't happen for a while. And then I had another studio in Alabama that I did some work for, and he kind of shut down too. But for the most part, yes, I saw an increase. Tune Designer saw an increase in both volume of people doing our regular clients and new clients. Because if you're at home, I just don't know why you wouldn't take advantage of the stuff. And I've heard various interviews of people that said, well, man, when I first started this thing, I just, with the shutdown, I was just bummed and I couldn't do anything.
I've heard cases where people have taken advantage of a pretty crappy situation, and instead of using it as a time to fold and give up, use it as a time to reevaluate whatever it is that they were working on. Right now, I work with a corporate band based out of Tulsa. They've gone through some personnel changes over the last 12 months. My addition is one of those changes. And I did a show back with them in March of 2020, right before everything just went to hell. And then for 5 months, we didn't have any communication or anything. And then I got a call back from them. And so we started talking again. And in the interim from that first gig to the second one, the musical director had decided that this was the time to revamp the band, to make it more of what I believe he envisioned it to be and what it was capable of being. And so he took advantage of the downtime for that. I think some people had that fatalistic view of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, so they didn't do anything. The fact that you were able to parlay what is typically a downturn for so many people into something profitable, it seems like, that speaks very highly of your resilience as a working musician. And there's a certain psychology that goes along with doing that, especially if you're out there on the road, like if you're a gigging musician. So going from session guy when you take that hat off to the touring musician, what's the psychological process in switching your mindset from one realm of music to the other? And how do you cope with life on the road?
Well, okay, that's a very interesting question. I got to tell you that for me, the hardest thing for me is because I'm in the studio and I have my place and I'm at Tune Designer, I can get anything I want in my mix. I want a full thing of the band. I may not want everything at each level, but I want that. And that can be tough. But I think one of the things I adjust to with when I play live, I want to play it as exact as I do in the studio, but I still want it to feel good. I don't know that I make a whole lot of adjustments other than maybe I don't use the same kit that I use live in the studio. I have enough drums to where I have a couple of different bands I play with, and 1 or 2 kits are designated for each band. As far as dealing with traveling, I think the best thing that you can do is allow yourself enough time to get to the venue and be on the road. Try to always get as much rest as possible. And that's the one thing that I found. It's real easy if you're on the road, when I did some dates with Confederate Railroad in 2000, I guess it was the end of 2019.
I love those guys. I didn't know you played with them.
I played the thing in Tampa with them. Their drummer was unable to make it, so I got to play with them, which was great. Hopped on a bus. There was a kit there. I brought like snare drum, in-ears, stick bag, pedal. It was do the bus thing again, crawl in a bunk and all that. I just think that the most important thing when you're on the road is to not let the rigors of the road wear you out. You've got to I know the days you and I have talked about this, but the days of getting all hammered and going and partying and then trying to go play a show are way long gone. And I think if you do that, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So I try to make sure I'm real funny about things too, Geno. I like to have clean clothes.
Yeah, there's something about that. I totally get that.
I do. I like to have a shower before a show or something like that. And fortunately, with their schedule, it allowed to do that. When I was touring years ago with Sunday Drive, I mean, we'd pull into a venue and we'd have to set up. And we have about 30 minutes to change clothes. And of course, we didn't have time to shower. And you just had to try to make the best of it. And I think that as long as you can keep a positive outlook, especially on the road, you're not going to piss off your bandmates and easier time with it, because the road is not like home. It's just not, and you just accept those differences. It's a different thing.
I've gotten that a lot from some of the musicians I've had the privilege of speaking with. Matt Maxwell, who tours with Lauren Elena, the country artist. That was one of the first things he said about life on the road, is you want to make sure that you're hanging out with a good bunch of people, that you're someone people can get along with, because it's not just not your band members. This is your road family, essentially. And Tasia Veal, she's been on the podcast, and she pretty much echoed the same sentiment. I'd hate to be in a situation where, like, Sting and Stuart Copeland were always fighting with each other, according to legend. On the one hand, given their specific situation as an original band, I think that tension was good for them and with respect to their creative process, but it really does make life on the road really difficult. David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen at one point might have been a textbook example of how not to live on the road together.
Right. And I will say, it's funny, you bring up Sting and Stewart. Stewart talks about Sting with so much affection. He calls him Stingo, and he got so much affection. And I saw something where they were in an interview together, or he was interviewing Sting or whatever. And it was really, I think they fought like cats and dogs a lot of times. But I think those two guys really love each other. And I think that's where it all comes down to this to me. I can't speak names, but I know of a band that has had a long time guy in the band, and I just think one of the only reasons why they don't fire him is because he's been in the band longer than anybody but the leader. But he is from what I understand, he's a real pain in the ass, doesn't want to do signings. His partner, his wife, would come to gigs and try to get meals for free and all that, and it wasn't that kind of thing anymore. It just makes everybody on edge. And what Matt said is true. I mean, you've got to be a good hang. If you're riding down a bus and you're not a good hang and nobody's going to be with you, your trip's going to be real short.
You're going to lose that gig pretty quick, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So surviving as a side guy, your answer was just staying on top of it.
Well, staying on top of it. And I think I always practiced, I don't know about anybody else, but I have practice pads set up all over the house. I'm fortunate in where I can walk downstairs. I've got a full kit set up. I can go play anytime I want, as long as it's not 3 a.m. But if I want to do that, I can still walk downstairs and play on a practice pad. Nobody would know I was doing it. I think keeping up on that, trying to learn new styles, being an agreeable guy. I will say this. I feel like I can play jazz. I'm not a jazz drummer. I can play the rap stuff. I don't think I'm a good rap drummer, but I can do it. And I think it's important, like Latin. I would never say, I'm going to sign up for this big time salsa band. I think that wouldn't be good. But I know the stuff. I know the bosses. I know the salsas. I know the sambas and all that stuff enough to where I think I could do a job at it and make that sound to where people can dance. And that in and of itself, I think, is why is surviving as a sideman. If you're going to take gigs, like, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say Friday night I'm going to play with a country band. So we're going to do George Jones, Chris Stapleton, Merle.
You got some good names going on there, man.
Yeah, the Masons. We're going to do all that. And then I'm going to go play with Nani and JJ, Fire and the Knife. And we're going to do their songs, which are very cool. And then we're going to do stuff like, they do this very cool version of Leather and Lace, which is a shuffle. Just stuff like that. They do...
I like the way they do the Tom Petty song.
They do Breakdown as a straight.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of, because I've played that with them. I played bass for them for a little while I was down there. And I loved that interpretation of that song. I think the way that Nani and Jason have taken some of the covers that they do, like Jolene, Ring of Fire, the way they've interpreted them and made them distinctly their own is pretty cool. And I think that's where someone like with the musical depth and knowledge that you have, and stylistically how versatile you are as a drummer. Bands like that can continue to do things, but they have to find the right fit. I think that says a lot about your adaptability as a session guy, which seems to be another trait that all of my guests have shared, because it's not just a gig. It's not like any one musician said, okay, I'm going to take only rock and roll gigs. I'm only going to play for bands like Jimmy Eat World or Toad the Wet Sprocket, or I'm only going to play for artists like The Whispers or The Temptations or whatever. It's just, what sort of gig can we get? What kind of music is it? And can I handle it? And
Yep.
being versatile definitely allows you to do that. I'm glad you brought that up. That was a cool version. I was just thinking of that version of that song the other day. Man, anyway, go ahead, George.
I love the way she thinks. But then, like, let's say, okay, I did that Saturday, and then I went and played at Mount Perrin Sunday for the youth. I love playing for the youth over there. I'm the oldest guy, not only on stage, oldest guy in the building, but they're doing stuff from Hillsong Young and Free, which is more very young sounding, very dance oriented. I mean, 4 on the floor, hand claps and all that. And I get to play with tracks there and clicks. And then Monday morning, I'll go play at Tune Designer and we'll go do our thing there. So I love the diversity. I really, really do. I think that it may be a form of, I have never been diagnosed with ADD, but I think that part of it caters to that. I don't ever want to be pigeonholed.
Yeah, I swear, I was just thinking the same word. It doesn't sound like you ever locked yourself or pigeonholed yourself into any one style of music, not even just one style of percussion. It's anything musical.
Yep.
Like you were saying, you were talking about the engineering side of things, even getting to that aspect. And I think knowing those sorts of things also helps in terms of setting up your drums, tuning your drums a specific way. I think there's a relationship between how an engineer will treat a drum set as opposed to how a drummer will. You hear the natural sound of the kit, you listen to it as a sound guy, and then you try to replicate it. Having a handle on both aspects of that is really valuable. If you're doing all these songs, for instance, and it's your artistic vision, even the way the drums sound is part of your artistic vision.
Oh, I agree. I mean?
And so being able to articulate that to an engineer, that's a really good dialogue to be able to have.
Yeah, and I think that for the most part, engineers, they're absolutely open to stuff. And I remember playing at a place in good old days, and the engineer there, Sean Paisley, got it. I said, this is what I want. I want it like the old Motown things to be almost a note. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want like Metallica's bass drum. That ain't going to work.
That sounds like a real loud slap almost. You want like some tone or depth to it?
Yeah. I will say this. The one time we played there and he wasn't there, the sub was there. A sub guy was there. I said, listen, with all due respect, what you're going for, you're trying to make us sound like a rock and roll band, and this is country. And I don't mean like Jason Aldean country, with all due respect to Jason, but this is traditional country stuff, and you can't treat it that way. And he said, well, what do you suggest? I said, well, take that kick drum mic that you've got an inch from my batter head, pull it out to where the hole is, and roll off that 2K that you've got boosted to high heaven and back, and let's go for a sound.
So you were getting a lot of attack on a lot of the sharp attack of the beater inside the drum instead of the fullness of the bass drum. I see.
It was killing me, Geno. I was like, and it was in my ears. I'm going, man, I got to play. This is killing me. I got to play, old shuffles, and I got to play quarter notes with it. It's going tick, 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 and I thought,
what? You have to take some Excedrin with that freaking
it's killing me. So, look, I think life should be a learning process. We are all, and I love Neil Peart said this, and I will borrow a quote from that esteemed master. We're all a work in progress. When the pandemic came, I decided to, okay, well, I got some time here. So the room across from my drum room that I'm sitting in now is now a percussion room. I got an expander for my mixer. I set up my congas, some rototoms, my gong bass drum, my djembe, and put some mics in there. So now when I want to record live percussion, I just walk across the hall with my iPad. And it's
that's pretty cool. I'd love to see your space. I'd love to see that space.
You're always welcome to come back here and see my space. You come back anytime.
Recording studios to me are like little private havens. I don't know why. I love the space. I love the feel. Right now I'm in my little project studio, which is essentially just my gear in a bay window, but I'm surrounded by my keyboards, an electronic kit to my left, and immediately behind me is just a little 5-piece acoustic kit. It's like a little cocoon. I love the energy. I love the space of a studio, but I'd like to check that out. It sounds like it's grown a lot since I saw you last.
Yeah. We invested in it, and that whole cocoon thing. I can come down here and just do stuff. I can come down here and play, or I can go to practice pads and play. And then before I realized it, I've been down here for 4 hours. Plus, we just redid the basement. So the only thing I don't have down here is a kitchen. And I'm afraid if I got a kitchen down here, and a bed, but if I got a kitchen down here, I may not ever leave.
Yeah, I will say nobody will ever see you again. Whatever happened to George? One question: you're in what I think is to be an ideal market.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're willing to travel 6-8 hours in any direction, you can be working in the Virginias, the Carolinas, Florida, Mississippi, even New Orleans. Given that we're much more mobile, do you think a mid-sized market like Kansas City, for instance, or a larger, more isolated market like Seattle, do you think that sustaining a career such as yours would have been as easy to have done in a smaller market like that?
Well, I will say no, because I think Atlanta is still considered a large market, but it's not as big as like a Nashville. But like you said, the cool thing about Atlanta is you're in a place where you can drive 6 to 8 hours in any direction and you can work. You're not far from Florida, and you can do a lot of gigs down there. How far are you from like downtown?
I'm an hour north of Tulsa. It's a bigger market than the one I grew up in, which is Wichita. I would say it's probably comparable to that of Kansas City. My recollection is telling me that Kansas City has a really strong blues scene, and in that respect, it reminds me a lot of Dallas.
I will tell you that if I had a place to move to, it would be Texas, because from what I understand, I've got buddies who live out there. There are plenty of gigs all over Texas, and you could do a tour of Texas in 30 days and not hit every part of Texas.
That is very true. That's very true.
I remember when I drove out there, I had a couple of gigs out there a few years ago. Texas is enormous.
Yes.
It's so big. We did, when Across the Wide did thing, we played in Fort Worth, then we drove to Houston. And I thought, well, that'll be fine. But man, Fort Worth, Dallas to Houston is not a drive for the faint heart. It's an 8-hour drive.
Yeah, it's a long haul.
But yeah, with the market thing, it's really tough. I know back in the day, remember in the 80s where everybody's, man, I'm going to LA, man, I'm going to New York.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I remember that. And then it was like, well, now I'm going to Nashville. And to a certain extent, there's still a scene in Nashville. It's coming back. I mean, COVID kind of killed a lot of it. But I'm of the belief now that if you're within driving distance of a major market, I still go and do gigs there if I wanted to. I get calls occasionally to go do them. And I've done some sessions there. So they have their own guys. I mean, Nashville's they're pretty not hip to outsiders.
And that's what makes networking so important, like you were saying earlier. Like, if you move to Dallas, you have a group of guys. You've already got a circle you can get into. That seems to be central to surviving as a working musician, is having those connections.
Yeah, I'm 55. I hope that I can keep playing for many, many years. I think probably what will end up happening is when I hit 65, I'm going to try to find a band where I can play like Asleep at the Wheel or...
You mean that literally and from the band?
Yeah.
What's on the horizon for you, George? What do you got coming up?
I got some studio stuff coming up. I'm going to be playing in the Pit for a production of Godspell, playing at church with Mount Perrin and Dunwoody and just doing projects here. We're going to be doing a Cars tribute.
Oh, I love the Cars.
And that's going to be fun because, again, we're integrating electronics and acoustics, had all that stuff. And just, I got 2 new grandbabies coming.
Oh, congratulations. Very cool.
They're all coming.
Boys, girls, do you know?
Boy and a girl.
Oh, that's so cool. You knock it all out at once, man. Of course, have more grandchildren. Why not, right?
Listen, I'm fine with that. I just don't want them to try to go into labor on the same day, because one's going to be giving birth in Athens and the other one's going to be giving birth close to Brazelton. It's like,
are they that close together?
One's the 19th and one's hopefully later on that month. My goodness.
You're not really sure, are you, George?
Well, you know how that works, man.
They come when they're ready. They just come out when they're ready. Well, good deal, man. So these shows you got coming up with Steel Rose and Bone Daddy and the Godspell thing, are you going to put those on your social media accounts? I have your Instagram and Facebook and Twitter accounts. I want to share those with people.
I'll definitely put them on the Facebook thing. I will put some of those on there. I will definitely do that. And if anybody's hankering to get a look, every other Monday and Tuesday, we always go live at some point down in Covington, and you can go to toondesigner.com, and those videos are always there.
Yeah, I'll put those links in there too, because the ones I've seen on Facebook are really, really cool. But George, thank you so much for joining me, man. I'm glad to have you. It's good to talk to you.
Anytime, Gino. I'm always here for you. You know that.
That sounds like a plan. If you do a fly-out gig here around Tulsa or Oklahoma City, let me know, man. We'll get together and hang out.
Sounds great, buddy. And the same thing, if you come back to Atlanta, you got a place to lay your head and hang out. So
well, that sounds good. As long as I can play your drums.
Okay.
I'm not very good, but...
That's fine.
All right. Sounds good, George. All right, everybody. That's George Sandler from Atlanta, Georgia, session drummer extraordinaire. Give it up for George. George, we'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, buddy. Take care of yourself.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.